Good evening, everyone. The Wild Rocket Health is here with you from this gorgeous planet Earth. This is the 10th Awakening Anniversary series commemorating a whole decade since my spiritual awakening in September of 2013. I explained in detail in the last video exactly what happened during my near-death experience and what led up to that point, as well as the subsequent spiritual awakening that emerged from that. So, throughout these 33 parts, we're now on part 32. I've covered quite a bit of ground. I've hopefully managed to explain clearly and articulately some of the main subjects and topics relating to the things that I've learned throughout these 10 years that have helped me become the most powerful and awesome person that I came here to be, and hopefully help others to do the same, to expand in more abundance and love and success, as Gay Hendricks puts it. So, today in part 32, I want to very briefly recap the first 10 years of my awakened second life, what's changed, what's different, and yeah, here we go, part 32, the first 10 awakening years. Now, after my spiritual awakening occurred in the foyer of the cinema in Cambridge, UK, I was just overcome with so much gratitude. As I mentioned at the end of my last video, I was just filled with so much happiness to the point where I'd just be on the verge of tears almost every single minute of the day, just being so thankful that I had the second chance at life, and just feeling my heart. For the first time in my life, I could actually feel my heart. I could actually feel basic human emotions like compassion and understanding and empathy. I could feel these in a very sincere and non-judgmental and non-egotistic way, and that was a really beautiful thing, and it was really wonderful. So as you can imagine, after anyone is born again, or any child who's born to the earth, you're very childlike when you are when you're first awakened. In the first couple of years, I would say the first 3 or 4 years of my awakening, I was very, very childlike and very eager, and I spent the first year the first year of 23rd, the first year after my spiritual awakening, from September 2013 to September 2014, I was in Dubai, staying with my mum at the time, and I was researching intensely and applying various spiritual techniques into my life. I realized very immediately that I had been given a very profound gift, that I had been given a gift of consciousness and insight, which would enable me to live my truest self and hopefully inspire others along my journey. So I went down a very profound and deep spiritual path. I started doing a lot of yoga, I started doing a lot of meditation, researching on health, particularly on raw veganism. I went vegan immediately after my near-death experience, something I wanted to do, and I found it remarkably easy, mostly because in my previous life I had been moving towards that direction anyway, but I had enough knowledge and skills now that I was able to make the switch, and the confidence to be able to make the switch right away. But, the first priority on the agenda was to deal with the slip disc. As I mentioned, I could no longer walk, and it took me a few months to regain mobility, and I didn't do it with surgery. I did it through very profound meditation, affirmations, and some yoga moves that I learned, particularly the cobra and the sun salutations. Those, coupled with the meditation and the newfound consciousness, made the physical healing process very, very quick. So I was able to do that. And I just spent that year just rediscovering and rebuilding my identity, more or less from zero. I started to discover things I loved, whether it's Japanese culture or anime or music, and I had a very childlike joy, and that served me well. I was able to I was quite shocked at how skilled I was at being able to attract anything I wanted. Without even trying, I was able to manifest pretty much anything, just because I had such a pure heart, and I was living in that moment, and I was thankful and grateful for where I was in my life at that moment, even though I was obviously always trying to improve myself. So, exactly a year after my spiritual awakening, I moved to Japan, where I worked full time as an English teacher. It was my first year teaching English in a classroom. And it was very exciting, very fun. I loved Japan very much. That was an amazing year. It was very difficult. I worked for the first time, even in my previous life, I hadn't really worked a full time job like that, so it was quite challenging. But because at that point I had been awakened spiritually, I was able to deal with everything that was thrown at me pretty effectively. Whether it was long work hours, some sort of misunderstandings with my employer at the time, I was able to deal with all of that really well. And I returned to England at the end of that year, in 2015, and that was a really beautiful time because for the first time I was on my home soil, but everything looked and sounded and smelt different because now I'd awakened. Now I was able to look around me and appreciate and love and value every experience and every day and every moment, and be so thankful that I was alive. So that first year of being in England, my awakening from late 2015 to late 2016 was beautiful. It was just a really wonderful. It was the childhood I never had really, and it was just a perfect. In that year, I basically reclaimed a lost adolescence and a lost childhood that I never really expanded to my capacity. So I left England in November of 2016, and I left on like the unimaginable high. There was a lot. By the way, this is the last time I mean, I haven't been back since to the UK, but I left on an incredible high. I had the most amazing job. I lived in the most amazing house. I had more money than I knew what to do with. So much love and support in the community in which I worked and lived and operated. It was amazing. It was wonderful. But as much as I enjoyed Japan the first time around, because I was working such long hours, I felt like I didn't really take advantage of the opportunity as much as I wanted. So I was able to move back again. I moved to Osaka, the west of the country, and I worked in a youth hostel for a year. And that was really wonderful. I met so many people, and it was again, I was working pretty hard every day, but it was much more manageable than the first year, where the kind of hours and the work, the nature of the work, was just a bit more than perhaps I wanted to do. So that was wonderful. Osaka was much more enjoyable and easier than the first time I was in Japan. But it wasn't without its challenges. I dealt with some social and friendship and identity challenges which were very, very acute. And that was, I would say, some of the first real, like, severe tests. I had some challenges in the first year of Japan. I was able to deal with them. The second time was a bit more challenging, I would say, but I was able to deal with them quite well. I applied for a residence visa to live in Japan, to remain there at the end of 2017, but I was not able to get it at the time. So again, I had to, and internally somehow I wasn't quite ready, and looking back on it now, it was a very clear upper limiting thing. Even though going to Japan was really expanding in my love, really expanding in the success, leaving England on a high and then going to Japan was really a continuation, because as much as I love my country, I love my home country very much, but Japan, I always knew in my heart, was the place for me. That was always the place I wanted, and that hasn't changed up until this day. But deep down inside, I realised that though the awakening had activated my third eye, a topic which I'll talk about later, but though it had activated my third eye and given me a whole new level of consciousness, there was still so much work to do to rebuild. And there were still parts of me which needed to be fully strengthened, and the lack of self-confidence even though I had a lot of confidence when I was in Japan, it still wasn't quite enough confidence to be able to allow myself to enjoy this fully, to kind of settle down and have a house and a family or a stable career. So I left Japan, that's for the second time, in late 2017, and what was meant to be a very kind of 2 or 3 year stint, staying in Dubai, working there, staying with family. Ended up taking much longer than I had initially planned. So I was in Dubai for a year, working as an English teacher, saving money. And that year in Dubai was a I would liken it to some of the challenges that Siddhartha or the Buddha faced after he awakened. He had so much compassion and kindness in his soul, but he had to face the fact that he was still embedded in a consensus reality that was so at odds with the kind of internal world he'd built for himself. So that year in Dubai was a real trial by fire in many, many ways. That would be from late 2017 to late 2018. However, it was so much different from my previous life because now I had the skills and the techniques and the know-how to start to navigate some of that. But it just took a very long time. However, I got to a place in late 2018 where I was very, very internally strong. Though I was still working on some things and rebuilding a new life, it was more or less like the transition from adolescence to adulthood in terms of the second life. And I took that with me as I moved to Turkey, to Istanbul, where I am to this day. I moved here exactly 5 years ago. I've been here ever since, and again, I didn't think I'd be here for as long as I have been. But then things like consensus reality events like the pandemic happened, and I realized as I was working on myself, I got sidetracked for the first couple of years, working really hard again, but not really taking care of myself. Having said that, because my subconscious mind was now renewed, I was able to navigate a lot of that stuff. But the pandemic happened, and the initial couple of years, the first year of the pandemic, year and a half was great. But then after a year and a half of mostly being with myself, after that initial kind of rush of high from moving to Istanbul and working and going out every day, was quite challenging to deal with. I started to realize that I would really have to take my consciousness and practice to the next level, because did I did face a lot of hardships since coming here, a lot of challenges. Some of the things I saw, some of the things people I've met, and things that have been said to me, and some of the trauma that I've seen from people here in Istanbul was unlike anything I'd ever seen from anyone growing up in England or in my short time in America or in Poland. I saw a level of humanity here and a level of trauma and just severe mental anguish that I'd never seen anywhere else. And it took a lot of practice to learn how to empathize with that and to feel compassion for that without absorbing those energies. That took a lot of training, a lot of triggers. I started to see a lot of ghosts show up in the form of the people around me, whether it's co-workers or passing students or even people on the street or people in the shops. I saw reflections of myself in these people, and that was very, very difficult for me because these were me. I see them as myself in a different space and time. However, they didn't have it as good as me, or maybe they experienced more hardship, and I realized I had a lot more inner work to do. So it was quite tough, and I would say I spent from late 2021, after the pandemic started to die down and the world opened up again, up until this present time, rebuilding myself. I lost my way a little bit, finding out who I was, much like a teenager who doesn't really know who he is yet. I found myself going through that phase all over again, not really knowing who I was, not knowing what my purpose is on this earth exactly, even though I had really powerful hint. I've been having lots of signals about what I should do related to health, psychology, sharing with people. But it's just for a long time I didn't exactly know how to manifest it in the 3D and how to make it real and make it actual and to make it a practical everyday practice, something I can really go for and use and actualize. Even now it's a little bit difficult to talk about, however, I'm much more clear on these things than before. So I started to establish a brand new identity. So what did I do? The first few years of my awakening, I was very childlike and by extension very kind of feminine, very compassionate, kind, optimistic. And then almost in the sort of the late childhood, early adolescent years, again, I went through a bit of a rebellious phase, although like conscious rebelling, sort of being a bit cynical and hard again, but again, doing it from more of a conscious place. not being unkind or toxic to people, but just kind of having a bit more of a reserved air about me. And part 2022 was like a very was the most challenging year since my awakening, for sure. 2022 was very tough. I was basically, that whole year was basically the crystallization of who I wanted to be coming to a nutshell, and I learned the power of what I managed to accomplish in 2022 was very profound, because I managed to accomplish this newfound masculine energy, this desire to bodybuild, to strength train, to be more masculine, with the compassion and the kindness and the love and this very profound awakening in conscious, which I was given from after my awakening. So that's what I managed to do, and finally I got to a place at the beginning of 2023 where I just knew I was ready to open up again. I found out who I am now at the beginning of 2023. The beginning of 2023, January of that year, after a wonderful Christmas and New Year, I knew exactly who I was, what I wanted to do. I was ready to show myself out in the world in my upgraded and final and ultra instinct form. Powerful, godly, magnetic, a very seamless integration of the masculine and, I wouldn't call it the feminine, but kind of the compassion and the heart and the sweetness and the kindness that came from the spiritual awakening. I learned how to use that in a very organic way. And this whole year has been just practicing that. I've been working more. I've been trying to interact with people more from a conscious place, not from a place of ego, not from a place of trying to make people think that I'm somehow better than them, doing it from a confident place, from an assertive and dominant place. But when I talk about assertion and dominance, I'm not talking about controlling or somehow limiting others, but just being the example, being the example of someone powerful and kind. At the same time, allowing people to be heard, accepting their truths, embracing their truths. Everybody's opinions matters. Even those who might disagree with me in a kind of consensus reality, opinion-based sense, to accept them, to love on them, and to not feel offended if someone shows signals which seem to be in opposition to me in any way. And that's just a 3D hologram, and that's not the truth. That love is our only truth, that compassion and interconnectedness is our only truth. So to be more masculine and true, to bash his way from a more conscious place and a more integrating place, has been really the practice that I've been honing in over the past 9 months. And I'm very thankful, because now I know that I've built a solid foundation. I'm still growing. I'm still very young in my awakening journey. 10 years is not a long time to live from year 0 to year now, but 10 years, I believe, I know fully well, it's a very strong and powerful foundation, and I'm very profoundly thankful for it. And yeah, I still make mistakes. I still continue to learn a lot. There have been some challenges, like integrating urges, moving into dreaming into them, but then the meditation has been so helpful for that. And then being experimental with different kinds of meditation has really helped me deal with some of the adolescent urges that a teenager would experience in his normal life, but then I am experiencing anew as a 36-year-old in consensus reality, but spiritually, of course, I'm still maybe 19, 20. So that's been a fun and interesting experience for sure. All right, so that's first 10 years of my life in a nutshell. This has been part 32, first 10 awakening years. Thank you for tuning in, for your patience and for your interest. Wild Rocket Health is here with you. Tune in to part 33 tomorrow, which will be the final part. I hinted as to what the topic might be, but if you didn't catch the hint, I'll leave it as a surprise for you. Om.